My name is Clara. I'm 26 years old, and I'm from a small town in Oregon. Most people would say I've had a rather ordinary life, until they see my face. You see, I've always had a birthmark that covers half of my left cheek. It's large, dark, and when people look at me, it's often the first thing they notice. I used to try to hide it, covering it with makeup, pretending it wasn't there, as if I could blend into a world that only valued perfection. But as I grew older, I started to accept it. I didn't have a choice. It became part of me, and no matter how many people looked at it with curiosity, with judgment, I learned to wear it like armor. Still, it didn't make the whispers, the stares, or the quiet mockery any easier to bear. In the corporate world especially, appearances mattered, and my birthmark was always seen as something that made me different, something that stood out in a way that made people uncomfortable. I had been passed over for promotions, more times than I could count, overlooked in meetings, and dismissed in favor of those who seemed more professional, those who didn't have anything that made them stand out too much. But they never knew. The real me, the one who worked late nights, the one who made things happen without anyone noticing. They didn't know that I was the one who kept the business running smoothly, the one who made the decisions that kept things afloat. I had spent years in the shadows, quietly listening, watching, and doing what needed to be done. I was always in the background, barely noticed, always treated as less than. But I didn't mind, or at least, I told myself I didn't. That was until the day I sat in that meeting. I had been working with the company for 5 years, slowly but steadily climbing the ladder, doing the work no one else wanted to do, making sure everything functioned while others took credit for it. That day, I was sitting at the table with a group of colleagues, discussing the next step for the company. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor was I the one commanding attention. I had learned to stay quiet, to speak only when necessary, but I heard everything. I always did. The room was filled with the usual chatter, the back and forth of ideas. But then I caught a few words, subtle at first, but clear enough to sting. They didn't know I could hear them. They thought they were being discreet, but I was listening. She'll never get the big accounts with that look. I don't know why she even bothers. It's like she's trying to fit in, but she doesn't belong here. I can't take her seriously with that thing on her face. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. They were talking about me. I could feel my face flush, my hands clenching, under the table, but I didn't move. I didn't react. I sat still, letting the sting of their words sink in, but I said nothing. I could feel my heart racing, the anger rising inside me, but I kept my composure. This was nothing new. This was the world I had been forced to live in for as long as I could remember, where the loudest voices took center stage, and the quiet ones, the ones like me, were left to fade into the background. They didn't realize they had underestimated me. They didn't realize how much I knew, how much I had been quietly absorbing for all these years. They thought I was invisible, that my birthmark and my quiet nature made me weak, easy to dismiss, but they were wrong. They didn't know that I had been in control the entire time. I wasn't just the girl they looked down on. I was the one who kept things running, the one who made the deals that no one else could pull off. And now I was listening. I could hear everything they said, and I knew exactly how to use it to my advantage. I had always played the quiet game, waiting for the right moment to make my move. But hearing them talk like this, hearing them dismiss me without realizing who I truly was, it was the final push I needed. The truth was, I had always known I was more than they saw. I was more than my appearance, more than what they assumed about me. I had been waiting for the moment when I would stop letting their words define me. I was ready to show them just how wrong they were. As I sat there, listening to the conversation unfold around me. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, though I wasn't sure if they even realized it. They weren't looking at me directly, but I could sense their discomfort, their judgment, floating in the air like a thick cloud. The words were soft at first, like whispers between colleagues who thought no one else could hear. But I heard every single one. They didn't even try to hide it. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. I caught every word, every dismissive tone, every judgment. She just doesn't look the part. She's not what they expect from someone in charge. I don't think she has what it takes. I felt my chest tighten with every word they said, but I didn't flinch. I didn't show that their words were landing, one after another, like tiny arrows piercing my confidence. I stayed still, my hands cold and stiff under the table, my face carefully composed. They didn't know that I could hear every single word, that I knew exactly how they saw me. To them, I was just another woman with a flaw, a face that didn't meet their standards of what someone in this room should look like. To them, I wasn't a person with ideas or skills or expertise. I was just a girl with a birthmark that marked me as other. They didn't understand how I had gotten to where I was, how much work I had put in to even be invited into that room. To them, I was invisible, just a placeholder, someone they could dismiss without a second thought. The worst part wasn't even their words. It was the way they said it, like they had already made up their minds about me, like my worth was already decided the moment I walked through that door. They didn't know how much I had fought to be here, how many battles I had fought to be taken seriously in a room full of people who didn't understand the value I brought. But here I was, sitting quietly, hearing them write me off as if I was nothing. I could feel my breath grow shallow as I fought the rising tide of anger inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep sense of betrayal. I had given everything to this place. I had sacrificed so much to get here. And this was the recognition I got. They didn't even see me. They didn't even see the work I put in. They saw only the face that didn't fit their mold. My birthmark, the one I had carried my entire life, was the only thing they saw. It was never just a mark on my skin. It was a symbol of everything I had ever struggled with. Everything I had been made to feel less than because of. It had always set me apart, always made me feel different, like I had to fight harder, just to be seen as equal. But I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let their dismissals dictate my worth anymore. Slowly, I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I forced myself to remain still, to maintain control. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I could do, and I wasn't going to let them define me. Their laughter, their whispers, they weren't going to break me. I had fought too hard for too long to let them undermine everything I had achieved with a few careless words. As their conversation continued, I focused on my breathing, silencing the anger and hurt that bubbled just beneath the surface. I had a job to do. I was here for a reason, and I wasn't going to let their ignorance and arrogance take that away from me. The meeting went on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted. It wasn't just about the money or the deals or the contracts. It was about my place in this world, the one I had fought to carve out for myself. I could feel their dismissal still lingering in the air, but they didn't matter. Not anymore. I wasn't going to let them define me. When it was time to speak, I did. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to prove anything. I just spoke the truth, confident in the knowledge that I belonged here. They might have written me off, but I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't just some woman with a birthmark. I was more than that, and soon they would all see it. The room felt different now. The harsh words they had spoken about me, the dismissals, the whispers. Everything had settled into a low hum in the back of my mind. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but it didn't hurt the way it used. 2. It was almost like I had built an invisible shield around myself, and their opinions bounced off, unable to penetrate. I wasn't shaken anymore. As the meeting progressed, I let their words fall away. I could see them now, really see them, and I knew that none of them understood the quiet power that I had always carried within me. They thought they could disregard me because of my appearance, because of something as simple as my birthmark. They didn't realize how much stronger I was because of it. I had been made to feel small for so long, my entire existence reduced to the mark on my face. But what they didn't know was that I had learned to thrive in those spaces, in the quiet moments when no one was looking, when no one was paying attention. That was when I did my best work. I didn't need loud words or grand gestures. I didn't need to scream for attention. I was perfectly capable of quietly making my mark on the world, without them even realizing what had happened until it was too late. As they continued talking, presenting ideas, and making plans, I stayed silent, listening, absorbing. I watched them all, their faces animated with excitement, their words flowing easily. I could tell they were used to being heard, used to commanding the room, but not me. I knew how to stay still. I knew how to listen, and that was where my power lay. When the moment came, I would act, and they wouldn't see it coming. They had no idea how much control I already had over the situation. They didn't realize that the very thing they overlooked, my quietness, was the strength that would lead me to the victory I had always deserved. They didn't know that I had been making decisions, quietly building relationships behind the scenes, the deals, the negotiations, the small victories. They all happened when no one was watching. They weren't aware of the influence I had gained, the alliances I had formed, the way I had quietly woven myself into the fabric of this company. And now, as I sat in this room, pretending to be just another face, I knew I was far more than that. It wasn't arrogance that fueled me. It was confidence, rooted in the knowledge that I had the power to shape things without ever raising my voice. I could feel the shift. It was subtle, but it was there. They were starting to notice. They were starting to realize that I wasn't just the girl who sat at the back of the room, quiet and unnoticed. I was someone to be reckoned with. I didn't have to prove it to them. I didn't have to shout or demand attention. They would see it on their own eventually. It was the quiet power that I had always carried, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And I was ready now, ready to step into the light and take my place. As the conversation continued around me, I remained calm, controlled. I could feel the tension in the room, the subtle shift in the way they were beginning to look at me. It was small, but it was there. The moment was coming, and when it did, I would act swiftly and decisively. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to force anything. I just needed to wait for the right opportunity, the right moment when they wouldn't have a choice but to acknowledge the power I had quietly accumulated. I could already feel the space I had made for myself, the way they were starting to listen just a little bit more closely when I spoke, the way they were beginning to look at me as more than just a girl with a birthmark. I was becoming someone they couldn't ignore, and the best part was, they still didn't realize it. They were all too focused on the wrong things, the things that didn't matter, to see the real me. But that was going to change soon. They would see. They would have no choice but to see the strength I had quietly built, the power I had earned, and the place I was about to take. The silence, the quiet moments, the times when I let them think I was just another invisible person. They had been my preparation, and now I was ready to make my move. The meeting was dragging on, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. The room was still alive with chatter, but it felt more like background noise now. As I focused on the task at hand, I could see them all, fully immersed in their own discussions, making plans, and pretending to act as though everything was as it should be. I couldn't help but wonder how many of them truly understood the weight of what was happening behind the scenes. They didn't realize the decisions I was making, the work I was quietly putting in, the things they never saw because they were too busy looking at the surface. They had no idea that while they spoke of progress, I was the one keeping the company afloat. They thought the important decisions were being made by the ones who dominated the conversation, by the ones who knew how to speak with confidence. They never considered that I had been the one making the real moves, the one with the knowledge, the one who understood the company's inner workings better than anyone. I was the one who had been quietly pulling the strings, making sure everything stayed in motion, ensuring that the business didn't fall apart. They didn't see it. They didn't want to. It was easier for them to focus on the things they thought were important, like who was speaking the loudest or who was dressed the sharpest. What they didn't realize was that they were all too busy playing the game by their own rules, thinking their surface-level accomplishments meant something, while I had already taken control of the board in a way they couldn't even fathom. The truth was, they were too blind to see the full picture. They couldn't see how much power I had quietly accumulated, how many decisions I had already made that were shaping the company's future. They couldn't see the influence I held, because I didn't wear it like they did. They didn't see the quiet authority I had built by doing the work, while they focused on the accolades. I was the one who had been fighting for the company behind closed doors, pushing through the tough decisions when no one was looking. And now, here I was, sitting in this room, watching as they continued to ignore the truth right in front of them. It was almost laughable how they hadn't noticed the weight I carried, how they had failed to see that I was already the one who kept the wheels turning. It wasn't about having the loudest voice. It wasn't about making the grand gestures. It was about knowing when to act, when to step back, and when to make the quiet decisions that actually mattered. They were too focused on the visible things, the flashy presentations, the polished speeches, the ones who spoke the loudest and looked the part. They had no idea that the real power didn't come from any of that. The real power came from knowing what was actually important and doing the work when no one was watching. I could feel my chest tighten as I watched them all continue to talk over each other, completely oblivious to what was actually happening. They were all so convinced they were in control, so sure that their voices were the ones that mattered. But I had been listening. I had been observing, and now, as the meeting continued, I knew it was time. It was time for them to see the truth they had ignored for so long. I had been waiting for the right moment to make my move. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to fight for attention. I just needed to let them see, in the clearest terms, that they were wrong about me. And when I made my move, there would be no denying it. They would have to face the truth they had been avoiding. They would have to realize that the one they had dismissed, the one they thought wasn't worth their time, was the one who had actually been in control the whole time. The moment I had been waiting for was almost here, and I could feel the shift beginning. It was subtle at first, like a quiet shift in the air, but it was growing stronger with every second, every beat that passed. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to find out. The truth they had been blind to was going to hit them all at once. And when it did, there would be no going back. The quiet power that I had been building, that I had been waiting to reveal, was finally coming to light. They would finally see who I really was. And when they did, they would know that their dismissals, their judgments, had been wrong all along. They had never seen the full picture, but they would now. And there, was no turning back. I had spent so much time pretending not to care, trying to ignore the dismissals, the laughter, the whispers behind my back. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had been playing their game all along, the one where I hid in the background, where I stayed silent and let them think they were in control, all while knowing deep down that I was the one who had the power. And now, as I sat there, surrounded by all of them, pretending to be just another face in the crowd, it hit me. This moment, this quiet feeling that had been building inside me for so long. It wasn't just about showing them I was capable. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about proving it to myself. I wasn't just the girl they laughed at, the one with the birthmark, who they thought couldn't possibly be serious. I wasn't just the quiet one who always seemed to fade into the background. I was the one who had made all the right decisions, who had kept this company alive when they had been too busy looking at the wrong things. I was the one who had been quietly building an empire they didn't even know existed. The clarity hit me like a wave, sweeping away all the doubt that had clouded my mind for so long. It was like a door had opened inside me, and for the first time, I could see the truth without any of the noise. I didn't need to fit into their idea of who I should be. I didn't need to apologize for my appearance, for my birthmark, for anything that they had used against me to make me feel small. I was more than enough, just as I was. And that moment of clarity changed everything. It wasn't a loud realization or a dramatic shift. It was quiet, but it was powerful. I could feel my chest lift as I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of self-doubt finally fall away. I was ready now, ready to stop hiding, to stop playing by their rules. I was going to step into my own power, the power I had always had, but had been too afraid to claim. I glanced around the room, watching them as they continued their discussions, oblivious to the fact that I was no longer the same person they had been dismissing. They hadn't realized yet, but they would. I wasn't going to let them keep underestimating me. The quiet power I had been building, the influence I had been quietly asserting without them even noticing, was about to explode into the open. I had been the one holding everything together behind the scenes, but now it was time for them to see it. It wasn't about making a grand statement or shouting to get attention. It was about letting them see the truth without me needing to prove anything to them. I had nothing to prove anymore. I had done the work. I had made the decisions that had kept this company alive. I was the one who had kept everything running when they thought it was falling apart. Now, it was time for me to take my place. It wasn't just about the work. It wasn't just about the money or the recognition. It was about finally standing in the light, finally letting them see the person I had always been underneath all the judgments and assumptions. I wasn't the girl they had written off. I wasn't the person they had thought was invisible. I was the one in control. And when they saw that, when they saw the truth of who I was, they wouldn't be able to deny it. The moment of clarity wasn't just about understanding my own worth. It was about finally being able to step into it fully. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less than. It was time for them to see exactly what I was capable of. The room was still filled with noise, with their discussions, their decisions. But now, I wasn't listening passively. I was taking control. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I was the one making the decisions now. And when the time came, when I finally made my move, they would understand that I had been the one they needed all along. The moment had arrived. I could feel the tension building in the room, the quiet shift that had been lingering for so long. They still hadn't realized what was happening, still hadn't seen the full picture. They were too busy talking over each other, too focused on their own agendas, to notice the power I had quietly accumulated. But now it was my turn. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I wasn't going to hide in the background, pretending to be something I wasn't. It was time for them to understand who I was. And more importantly, what I had been doing all along. I stood up slowly, calmly, and the room fell silent. The conversations tapered off, and all eyes were on me. I could feel their gazes, expectant and curious. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt present. The words I had been holding back for so long were finally ready to leave my lips. They had no idea how much I knew, how much I had already seen. They didn't know that I had been in control of the company's finances for months, pulling the strings behind the scenes, making sure the money was where it needed to be. They thought they were in charge. They thought they could decide who was worthy of attention, of respect. But they had missed something that had been right in front of them the whole time. They thought my birthmark made me less than. They thought my quietness made me invisible. But what they didn't realize was that it was all part of the plan. I had allowed them to underestimate me. I had let them write me off because of my appearance, because they thought I was weak, because I didn't fit their image of power. But now I wasn't hiding anymore. Now it was time to show them the truth. I walked to the center of the room, my steps measured, confident, every movement calculated. I wasn't looking at any one of them. I wasn't looking for their approval. I was looking at something much bigger. The future I was about to step into, the place I was about to claim. I pulled out the documents from my briefcase, the papers I had been quietly working on, the financial reports they hadn't seen. I knew the numbers, the deals, the money flow better than any of them ever could. They had been too busy thinking about their positions, their titles, to understand the business that was being run beneath their noses. I laid the papers down in front of them, the weight of the numbers making a silent statement of their own. I watched as their eyes moved over the documents, confusion quickly turning to shock. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to be the one holding the keys to the future. One by one, their faces changed as the realization dawned on them. They had been so sure of themselves, so convinced that they were in control, that they had completely missed the fact that I had been the one who had kept the wheels of the company turning. I wasn't just a face with a birthmark. I was the one who had built the foundation they had been standing on. They had never seen it coming. And now, as they realized the truth, I could see the shift in their expressions. The arrogance that had once defined them began to fade. The confidence they had exuded in their dismissals of me started to crack, and as it did, I stood taller. I didn't need to shout, to demand attention. The truth was speaking for itself. I could feel the shift in the room. It wasn't a loud shift. It was subtle, quiet, but it was undeniable. I had proven my worth, not through grand gestures or loud declarations, but through action, through silently taking control. And now they couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't just someone they could push aside. I was the one who had earned my place. I was the one who had built the future they all depended on. I looked at each of them, one by one, and I could feel their understanding, their begrudging respect. They had thought they could take me down, thought they could dismiss me. But now, they saw. They saw that I was the one in control. The reckoning wasn't in the words I said. It was in the actions I had taken, the power I had quietly claimed, and the strength I had never shown them. And when the moment was over, when the silence had settled, I knew I had won. Not just the room, not just the deal, but my place in this world. Finally, I wasn't just the girl they had laughed at. I wasn't just the girl with the birthmark. I was Clara, and now everyone would remember my name.